For one, I think it's important to appreciate that women are diverse. So I think for this particular moment, it's particularly important to say Cleopatra is a transgender woman, not to nullify my womanness.
Hi and welcome to another episode of Black No Sugar. My name is Patra. If you're joining us for the first time, you're very, very welcome. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you prefer to listen, we are on Anchor Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So today with me, I have a wonderful person I've just met for the first time today. Her name is Cleopatra. I am Patra, but she's Cleopatra.
Happy to meet you, Patra.
Nice to meet you, Cleo. So Cleo is a Ugandan transgender woman and activist working in Uganda and Kenya. She's done a lot of work around LGBTQ rights, and recently she has been in the news as the first transgender woman to publicly acquire a national ID.
Publicly. Yes.
So, getting a national ID can seem like, we as Ugandans, we have our hurdles in getting a national ID, but I imagine it's much, much different or harder for people like yourself.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that at some point, but first, just tell us briefly about who you are, what you do, everything that you'd want us to know. Tell us.
I don't know if I'll cover everything in
brief.
Yes. Yeah. I'll take a minute. Well,
Yes.
my name is Cleopatra Kambugu. First of all, I'm Munyanga. I'm a Mtoro.
Yeah.
And just to ground my Ugandanness, my background is in genetics, and molecular biology, and that's my interest. Like, if I wasn't doing human rights work, I think I'll be doing that.
Yeah.
But I find myself in this place because, people like me don't have that much access in the world, and particularly in Uganda. So I also do activism. It's really personal activism, like on my personal spaces on my Instagram, but I also do work in the same field. So I work in the field of philanthropy, which means supporting communities that are working to alleviate, the violences that are targeted to people that are like myself, so LGBTIQ folk, because of who they are.
Yeah.
And then besides that, I also love films. So I've done like one single documentary that at one time sat on Netflix, and maybe it might still come out later if we redistribute. But it really chronicled my journey in navigating just being able to affirm, like get validated, affirm that journey of what did it mean for me and my family, or having a relationship, and simply the medical process. And I speak about the other things because it's not just a medical process, it's a whole social process of even your parents understanding you, and friends and school and church and everyone. So it's been a journey.
So I know what I have so many friends and people that I know, and from just reading and educating myself, I know what transgender means. But there are people who may be watching this for the first time, or have never had, or it has never quite made sense to them. But also because people tend to confuse sex and gender. So I'd like you to explain briefly, if it's okay, what does being transgender mean? Why can't I just say Cleopatra is a woman and that's it? Like, why do I have to say Cleopatra is a transgender woman? What does that mean?
For one, I think it's important to appreciate that women are diverse. So I think for this particular moment, it's particularly important to say Cleopatra is a transgender woman, not to nullify my womanness, but to say that there are different kinds of women, and to say that this particular kind of woman as a diversity hasn't been recognized. But what does it mean to be a transgender woman, you ask? Well, the simplest example is, imagine you woke up tomorrow and someone told you you're a man because you were a different body. But only you know your Patra. And I think the journey of transitioning for so many trans people is the unobscuring of what already was. So if you woke up in that predicament, it's, your Patra, but everyone tells you you're not. And they're giving you different IDs. And then you're like, no, I'm not. I am actually Patra. And so what does that mean for a trans person? That means taking pills, that means you go through a second puberty, or having surgery, or just changing your documents to speak to who you really are, who you really have always been. So I don't think there's ever a moment for me that I ever identified as a boy. But I know there was ever a moment where I had documents that read boy and I wore boy shorts or shorts they call boy shorts. And then I went to school, I had a boy name, you know, a name that is considered a boy name. And I say that in quotes because I don't think names are names. Because one of my names was Hillary. I could have chosen to stay with it. I don't know why some names are unisex and some aren't, but yeah. So it was really that journey of, one, understanding and appreciating myself, because we also have to appreciate that when I was born in the time 1986, just after Museveni got onto the seat, and there wasn't language for transness. So literally, it's starting to develop your own lexicon, your dictionary of words to start describing yourself, because there wasn't anyone like me back then when I was growing up that I could look up to. So it's that I could say, this is how you go about life. In my puberty years, dating
must have been confusing.
Completely confusing. And then just developing the language, knowing you will not get any support, and then finding other people that are like me, which is why then I got into this work of just knowing there's someone besides myself who has gone through this, and connecting around support, and not feeling alone. And then finding the money, of course, to figure out these things ain't easy, like being on like hormones, which is a requirement for you to like medically transition, is a lifetime commitment. Our government doesn't provide that. As part of a basic need for survival for myself is I have to buy that myself. Or going for surgery, that had to be something that I had to do from non-Uganda, because we don't have those services here. We don't recognize them. So that was a journey. And then came the ID and the passport.
So just to take you back a bit, I want to know what it was like. And for me, I'm asking this question because maybe in a few years, maybe 10, 20, 30 years, they're going to be little children who experience that kind of thing, and they don't know how to go about it. So what was it like for you growing up as a boy? Like everyone knows you're a boy called Hillary. But you know that you're Cleopatra. What was that like? But also especially for your parents, because I think our parents struggle sometimes to understand. They have a certain way they want us to be, and then we turn out to be different from how they'd hoped we'd be. So what was that like?
So that saying, kids are innocent. I think I would say that for myself. I did so many things differently. So, and even as I say this, I don't think gender roles should restrict people from having access to something. But I'll say this: when I was a child in kindergarten, so they separate the toys. There is what they consider boy toys and girl toys. They still do that. I don't know why they do. So actually, I used to end up picking the so-called girl toys, to the extent that they had to call my mom and ask if there was a situation at home that meant that I was choosing girly stuff, like in terms of toys and games, because these things are gendered. And yet, when it comes to like in secondary school, you stay in different, like the dormitories are separated by gender. So I know that up to the age I was in university, my parents made, I think, a conscious decision that I had to be in their school. So I only stepped out of our home to be in a boarding school in Makerere. I was in Livingston.
Right next to Africa. I was in Africa.
I was in Livingston. And I remember the first time I went to campus to report, my dad literally took me and handed me over to the warden. I didn't know then, and I don't think he would have explained, but I think he realized this one is going to be a special case. And so I went in with my dad to the warden, and then afterwards I got out and they discussed it. I don't know what. All I know is that there was so much attention to my movements, my room selection. I had my own room in second year, and I was like, I think it's privilege, but I think it's my protection. Every weekend, my mom and dad
were really in your own world.
Yes, they were coming to. They used to come like to Livingston every weekend. to actually check on me. And I thought it was caring, and I used to hate it.
Yeah.
But it was to just make sure that, you know what,
Okay.
I was fine.
Yeah. Like after you made the decision to physically transition,
Yeah.
and now it's real for your parents. I imagine, okay, like now it's real. You know how we're
Yeah.
saying that they'll maybe think, oh, it's a phase, like this is how they are, and then suddenly,
Yeah.
like there's a whole complete change, like a whole overhaul.
Yes.
Name change,
Yeah.
physical, everything. What was their response?
So after
Especially
transition,
considering they had been supporting you all the way, and like what was their response to that? Have they been accepting? But also even the wider family, because family is not just, you may think like, okay, yeah, my mom and dad are cool, but then there's all these other people
yeah.
in the family that say mwana wagundi, like, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
over what bichi, and they influence them
Yeah.
a lot. What was that?
To start with, I come from a family of 15. So my
Yeah.
dad has 14 kids. And I have like 5 moms.
Yeah.
And aunties.
Yeah.
So that was hard.
Yeah.
Convincing each
Everyone
of them.
has a different.
Yeah, but we are an extended family that's into each other's space. So in
Yes.
as much as that means that people will interact with your life, it also means they'll be supportive.
Yeah.
So and even as I say this, my journey transitioning was more than a decade. So while your viewers might be experiencing this in a second, this took a lot of years of fighting with my family, of them questioning, did we do something wrong parenting? I'm used, from when I came out to my parents, I was doing my master's, I was in DAG. And I knew at that moment when I looked at my dad's face and my mom that they didn't hate me. They just did not know how to deal with it. Yeah. And for them, it was like, we've always known, but now, when you've spoken something, it can't be taken back. Because my dad used to poke me and ask me, what are you? What are you? And then I told him, Dad, you've always been asking me what am I? I'm going to school, I'm going to Malago, I am trans, it means this. He had a computer at home. I'm like, read on the computer and find out. So it was very respectful. Yeah. He wasn't ready. My parents weren't ready, but it was thrown in their laps. And at the end, my dad was like, I understand you're trans, but do you have to go through all this? So that's where my dad, for him, he was like, and then the other part was like, do you have to be open about it? Because at first my dad saw my being trans as an insecurity, as something that would not make me get a job, get married. So for him as a parent, he's still managing his expectations of what our parents have when they give back to us. And then for me, I'm like, okay, you gave birth to me, but this is my life. So it becomes that game of compromising or meeting people halfway when it comes to family and friends and church. And it was just me knowing when to give people space to deal, to find information, and when to step in. Yeah, to process. And when to step in. And honestly, I haven't been over-imposing when it comes to my family. They've all taken the time they've taken. Yeah. And right now, when you meet me in my family, you might think we've always been this cool about this, but we weren't. Yeah, I had to literally have the journey with each and every one of my siblings, my parents, my moms, and my uncles. Each at their own time. Honestly, there is no timetable, but each at their own time have had that conversation to the point that it seems like a rosy pack situation, but it wasn't always like that. Yeah. And they still have questions. Yeah. They still find it hard knowing that I'm trans, openly so, and they live in this country. Like me doing this, what will it mean for them? In terms of people like, oh, your child is doing ABCD, because they do understand. But do their friends understand? Do my dad's friends understand? Yeah. Do people where he still understand when they watch this? And for me, that's the thing that everyone does understand. My parents understand that we don't choose our children, we don't choose our families, and there's honestly nothing wrong with being trans. Yeah. It's different, but it is what it is. They are different people. Yeah. Some people are trans.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really nice. So then come in this whole national ID thing that's everywhere on the news. Yeah. So I know there are some trans people that have their national IDs, though not publicly. Yeah. But you announced this, publicly. Like it seems, like I said before, it seems like a small, easy thing. Like okay, some people have been waiting for theirs for like 3 years. 4 others moved on. And those are the hurdles of the average Ugandan. Like I haven't received my ID for 3 years. And so. But I imagine it's different for people like you. were there any hurdles? What was the process like? And this is also especially for people, other trans people who want this as well. Why is this a big deal? Why is it something that you have to talk about?
For me, it's honestly like the first time that Rosa Parks sat on that bus and Kamala got to become, Kamala Harris got to become like part of the, the Biden presidency, or the first time women got to vote and became full humans, not owned by men, because there was a time when women were owned by men, or black people got recognized as human beings. I'm sure there was a similar debate that black people, human beings, but can we have this debate right now? We cannot.
Yeah.
And it starts with such conversations where, a black person has been able to vote is a big deal. It was back then, because the reality was slavery.
Yeah.
But for me, and for me and to the world, it just goes back to that thing that just because something happened, it doesn't mean it's legal or fair. It might be in the laws, but it doesn't mean it's fair.
That's
so,
true.
and that's something that's really etched in our history as a human. So there's always that one person who challenges the status quo and says, this is not right. And people are like, why? Like when the person said that the earth is round, like how can the earth be round and we are walking on it flat? So yeah, this might seem very illogical to so many people that I exist, but I do. And I would like to explain the peculiarities of my existence as might be peculiar right now, only because it's not known, but not because it hasn't always existed.
Yeah.
So it was hard. Why? Because we're an underground community. It's not something you want. Even as I said, this is an amazing thing that happened to me. When a Ugandan wins like the race and the IAF, it's a big deal. It's something to celebrate. But this is not something Ugandans would want to say they want to celebrate. It's not a positive win. The same way it wasn't a very positive win per se, though it was a positive win. When a slave said, no, I will not be allowed to be lashed one more lash. Yeah, so it's that. So it was completely hard. Also because, for the ID process, you need to go to your LC1. The RDC, your parents have to give you your ID. So if I had a bad relationship with my parents, if the LC1, or if I had this huge self-stigma about myself, that I couldn't ask for what I needed, so many things would have gone differently. I would also speak about my passing privilege. I think the fact that I've had surgery and have transitioned makes it easy for people to, I'm an easy to deal with trans person, I would say. The same way if someone was a lighter black person, they benefit from white person.
Yeah.
So there's that privilege.
Yeah.
So I don't think I laid it out for everything to happen the way it did, but everything happened the right way.
So
like
you had to change all your documents because
literally,
you have to change your birth certificate.
Literally.
You have to change.
Literally. Yeah.
Your academic documents.
So I've only so far done, the biggest thing you need to do in Uganda is an affidavit, linking your previous personhood to the new personhood.
Yeah.
That means any place you go where you have a previous personhood, the new personhood is also recognized.
Yeah.
So then for that document, I frequently use, like I don't go to school right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to school. But I need to work, so I need a work permit. Sorry, I need when I'm filing my tax entry to Cleopatra Kambugu,
Yeah.
So this document that I'm using right now, when I'm opening a bank account, getting a SIM card, those processes are linked to having a national ID.
Yeah.
I literally can't have, you can't have a number if you don't have a national ID.
Yeah.
So this is my first time at 35 having a SIM card that literally reads my name, and I'm 35.
Yeah.
It's that weird, or having a bank account under my name. I work. But it's just been difficult to open an account because I either have to open it under my partner's name, or I literally couldn't have, or open it under my old name, which means every time I go, they would ask, who is this person? And you look like this.
Yeah, you look different.
Or buy land. Like things you do when you're 35, you want to buy a house, or just even renting, because these days they ask for like tenancy agreements and an ID. Yeah. How would you expect to submit an ID that read like, it would confuse that person, things like this. So it's just been literally difficult, including traveling.
Yeah.
At some point, I had to be asked to remove my clothes to see what my body looked like to prove where I fell. One of the things
what
you do.
Box you fall
yeah, when you travel, you don't think that you don't think that, okay, they'll ask for a visa. My body has to match the body on the passport.
Yes.
You assume they should understand. And you have biometrics.
Yeah.
I don't know why people still have to check people's body and subject them to such indignified treatment
So
when
impressive.
traveling. Yeah, it's very, it
So
is.
impressive.
It is.
So here's something I've noticed in Uganda, that a lot of our legislators, the way they legislate things based on their own personal biases. Our culture says this, or the Christianity says this, and we're even a secular country. But there's certain ways that they legislate, and I feel like for the bigger part, the laws or the way that legislators legislate are influenced or guided by what our communities actually think. And I feel like maybe that's why there's not been like an actual law that has been put there regarding like sexual minorities, or like it's just there. Like let's not touch it. They'll talk about it and debate about it in parliament, and then it will stop there. Because I feel like at the back of their minds they know that we have trans people in our communities, we have lesbians and gay people in our communities, but let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
So how do us, like the people in the community, begin to begin to influence the debate? Because you'll find like maybe a member of parliament would rather not talk
First
about
of all, I don't think
LGBTQ rights.
I don't think it should even be legal to legislate over people's existence, which is what it would mean if you had a law in our constitution that speaks about transgender people. Should they exist? If we're going back to that place, honestly, we're going back to Nazi times, where we are moralizing about people's existences and whether we should annex them or not, which is what's happening right now.
But if the law allows for the law is violent in itself. Yeah.
So
I don't think it's like it says this is not allowed. That your existence has already been cancelled.
I think at the very minimum what the law can do is to address the generational erasure of trans people, because that means that injustices go unchecked for and addressed, and generally there are people that are not planned or programmed for. So the first thing is, as government has done with other excluded genders like cis women, is think about gender affirmative action, whether that be in terms of exclusion in education, in employment. So that then we start having, if we have any policy about people who are trans, it's then to say, how can we address the generational erasure of trans people and the violence that went on unseen and sometimes even justified by law? Because we actually do have a law that speaks of same-sex marriages.
Yes.
And in our penal code, until recently, if I got married to someone who was a cisgendered man, I would be a victim under that penal code. But am I a man? So it's not targeting me per se, but it would. And there are so many trans people who haven't gone through my process that it would then target. Right? So there's all this stuff that means that unless we really, I think as a country we need to dig in and say, let's not assume that the apple falls from that tree to the ground.
No, I mean, see how like, you remember that time when women were being killed and people were able to speak up, and there was a whole march about that and things. But if someone came on the street and queer people were being stoned in the streets or beaten, no one is going to say anything.
And that's the problem.
No one is going to say anything. So I want to know what you think, that us as a community, what can we do?
Reshape the agenda. It's what you're doing right now. I think the narrative has been twisted since flipped. Because tomorrow I could be blind. For any reason. I want to know that there's a person who is not able to see the world visually like most people see. Even as a minority, I'm accounted for in being able to express the world the same kind of way. So it's not an issue of being trans or anything. It's to say, do all people have the same access, irrespective of which tribe they are, which gender they are, who they worship, the color of their skin, or what you have between your legs? Honestly, what does that have to play? in any conversation around access to health, education, employment. It has nothing. I don't know why we are really bothered about what I have between my legs being a conversation that needs to end up in a constitution and that denies me employment. So I think it's to throw it back and say, why? Why shouldn't I go to school? Why shouldn't I have that same access like I should? And why we're talking about this is because some people think I shouldn't, and I'm saying no, unless you tell me why not. And I can't see the reason why not. I shouldn't have an ID, and I'm speaking about it because the world Uganda wasn't created to include transgender people. Why? We're not anywhere in the literature of our narratives that shows. So we are paving way for ourselves in a world that wasn't made for us to start with. Now, if that feels like I'm pushing back against some blocks, it will hurt. It also means it's to rebuild or change the narrative. So I know most people are relying on a narrative that says male and female, but here I am. So let's start from she exists, what is this? And I'm answering that question.
I think I like what you ended with, like, why not? Like, I don't have an answer for that, but I do hope that whoever is listening or watching will be able to sit with that and start to think on how they can change the narrative around transgender rights and LGBTQ rights, and how we can be better. So thank you, Cleo, for engaging with me. I hope that I have exhausted everything. I do feel like this conversation could have been longer, and I hope that we can have more opportunity to talk. I think that the topic is wide. There's so much to talk about.